Raskolnikov gives his last coins to a dying man's family and then goes home to plan a murder. Same chapter, same character, same afternoon. That kind of contradiction is not an accident, and if you have ever written a character who feels flat, not badly written, just flat, what I'm about to say might explain why. Hi, I'm Andrea, the founder of Bibisco, the novel writing software downloaded by more than 200,000 writers around the world. And today I want to talk about something that most writing advice gets, I think, quietly wrong. By the end of this video, you'll know how to find the contradiction that's already pulling your characters in two directions at once, without having to invent anything new. And when you find it, writing them becomes something else entirely. When you learn to write characters, the first thing you learn is consistency. Give them a clear motivation, a clear goal, a clear arc. If they want revenge, they pursue revenge. If they want love, they pursue love. The idea is that the reader should always be able to follow the logic of what this person is doing and why. And it works. Kind of. It works until you read Dostoevsky or Flannery O'Connor or Gillian Flynn, and then you notice something that's a little hard to name at first. Those characters want two things at once, two things that cannot coexist, and somehow that tension is exactly what makes them impossible to forget. That's not a flaw in how they are written, that's the whole engine. Take Raskolnikov. He tells himself he's killing the pawnbroker for a rational reason, one harmful person removed, so that good can be done with her money. He builds a whole philosophical theory around it, and he takes that theory seriously. But underneath that, what he really wants is to prove that he is extraordinary. Someone above ordinary morality, a Napoleon of the mind, someone for whom the usual rules simply don't apply. And at the same time, and this is where it gets complicated, he still needs to be human. He gives away his last coins to the family of a man he barely knows. He stops to help a girl being followed on the street and cannot let go of the very humanity he's trying to transcend. He wanted to be extraordinary without becoming a monster, and those two things were never going to coexist peacefully. And that fracture, more than anything else in the novel, is where the character actually lives. And it's that contradiction between what he tells himself and what's underneath that makes him unforgettable. And here's what makes that weight permanent. If Raskolnikov were simply a man who does something terrible and then repents, the story would end at the confession. Guilt, punishment, resolution. A clean arc that's understandable and even satisfying. But Dostoevsky doesn't do that. Even in Siberia, even after everything, part of Raskolnikov still believes he was right, just not strong enough. The real problem in his mind isn't that he crossed the line, it's that he failed the test. Whatever movement towards something new happens at the very end of the epilogue. It arrives slowly, and it never quite resolves the original question. Dostoevsky puts this there deliberately. He wants you to feel what an unresolved contradiction actually weighs, the human residue that a tidy lesson would have erased. And this isn't just one novel, this is Dostoevsky's entire method. The Underground Man opens by calling himself sick and spiteful, defining himself immediately and clearly, as if he wants to get it out of the way. And then, almost in the same breath, he starts to undermine it. He contradicts his own self-description, because he can't even commit to being what he just said he was. He isn't a spiteful character who does spiteful things. He's someone who wants to be spiteful and cannot quite manage it. That instability, that failure to cohere, that's not a flaw in the writing. That fracture is the character. If this way of looking at characters is someone you want to keep following, there's more coming on this channel. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to stay with it. Then there's Ivan Karamazov in The Brothers Karamazov, and his contradictions works at a completely different level from Raskolnikov's. Ivan is one of the most rigorous intellects in all of literature. He constructs an argument against God, against the existence of a world in which innocent children suffer. That is so precise, so morally serious that his own deeply faithful brother Alyosha cannot refute it. And then Dostoevsky shows you what happens next. Ivan cannot actually live his own conclusion. He lost his brother. He feels the weight of every person around him. He cannot become the cold philosophical rebel that his own argument requires him to be. What's interesting, and this is where Dostoevsky goes further than most writers would, is that the contradiction doesn't stay as intellectual discomfort. It turns inward and eventually breaks him. By the end of the novel, Ivan is visited by the devil. And the devil, Dostoevsky makes very clear, is not a supernatural figure. He is Ivan's own mind, finally fracturing under the pressure of holding two irreconcilable things at once for too long. Raskolnikov's contradiction was between what he wanted to become and what he already was. Ivan's contradiction is between what he can think and what he can feel. And in Dostoevsky's world, you cannot sustain that distance indefinitely without cost. So here is what I think connects these three characters and what most writing advice quietly misses. Raskolnikov, the underground man, Ivan, they don't simply have internal conflict in the ordinary sense. Each of them is built around a specific incompatibility that Dostoevsky never resolves for them. He doesn't let the contradiction become a lesson. He lets it remain a condition. And I think that's the real difference between a character who feels alive on the page and one who feels assembled. It's usually not a question of how many traits you have given them or how detailed their story is. It's whether there's something inside them that genuinely cannot be reconciled and whether you, as a writer, have found it and held it clearly enough to write from it. That kind of clarity doesn't come from inventing something and adding it to your character. It comes from looking more carefully at what's already there, at what's already pulling in two directions without quite resolving. It's not something you force into a character. It's something you find when you look at what they want and then ask what makes that wanting impossible to fulfill without cost. This is exactly the kind of work bibisco is built for. When you open a character in bibisco, one of the first things you encounter is the interview mode, a series of questions that go well beyond name, age, and physical appearance. In the psychology section specifically, the questions begin to surface things that are harder to name. What your character fears, what drives them underneath the reasons they give themselves, where their self-image doesn't quite match who they actually are. That's where the contradiction tends to appear. Not invented but drawn out by the right question asked at the right moment. And once you have found it, you can hold it in a mind map, a visual space where the two things pulling against each other become visible, and where you can see how that tension connects to the rest of the character's world. So when you sit down to write a difficult scene, you are working from something you have already mapped, something you can return to without having to reconstruct it from memory every time. Dostoevsky didn't write contradictory characters by accident. He understood, and I think this is what most writing advice still quietly misses, that contradiction isn't a problem to solve in character design. It's often where the character starts to feel real. You might notice it in your own writing already. The characters who stay with you longer, the ones that feel harder to finish, the ones who move in directions you didn't quite plan. That's usually where the contradiction is. If you want to map your character's contradiction rather than guess at them, try bibisco for free. The link is in the description. Happy writing and see you in the next video. Bye bye.